Hello. So, one thing I want you to think about as I go through my story is what is two ways to think about it. What is God saying yes to that you might be saying no to? Or where is God leading you that you are resistant right now in your life? So, was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I have mom, dad, three siblings. I have a twin sister. I am the second. I was born 1 minute before her. Born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Didn't have any encounters with God, or my first experience with God was growing up in the Catholic Church. So those of you who, if you've been in the Catholic Church, when you're 4, 5, 6, 7 years old and you walk into a place like that, and part of the message was, or the mass was in Greek and part of it was in Arabic. I'm half Lebanese, but most people can't tell that. You don't know what's being said. So God to me was just the huge picture in the back, and Jesus on the cross, and everything was very, it's very sacred, which I still have a value for, but it didn't mean much. And so I was an altar boy at one point as well. And then my family moved to Charlotte when I was 9 years old. My father is a guy who struggles with alcohol. He struggled with it for his whole life. His own stuff that he never worked on. My mom, codependent, shame, things that she hasn't dealt with. We moved to Charlotte when I was 9. And from the time I was 9 until the time I was 21, I did not have any interactions around God, faith, Jesus. There was a few times I remember vaguely with my twin sister to get out of our house that we would go to a Catholic mass. We would actually have one of my parents drop us off on a Saturday evening just to get out of the house. And then we'd come home. And I think really, now that I think back about it, was just separation to get out of the home and the dysfunction and all of that. So from 9, 10, 11, no God. The only time, so with my dad and the way that he acted in our home, I came to a point where I wanted to be loved by him, but I hated him. And I thought the wise thing to do, this is why adolescents don't need to make any decisions. I thought the wise thing to do was, well, if I wasn't clear on what my path was going to be, that I just knew that I didn't want to be like him. And so rather than choosing alcohol, when I was in 9th grade, I started smoking weed, which evolved into every other drug that you can think of. And so I did that for a few years. Got arrested when I was 17. That woke me up a little bit. My dream for the majority of my life was to coach college basketball. Well, actually, it was to play. But when I was a freshman in high school, I was 5 foot and I weighed 85 pounds. So, I'm not that much bigger now, but it's so it wasn't going to go very far. So in my 9th grade year, that was kind of the catalyst, I think, for the despair of, well, what am I going to do with my life if I'm not going to do that? So that was led into a lot of the drug use. So that went on for a few years. When I was arrested, that woke me up, but it wasn't enough to really course correct. I was able to graduate. It was, barely got out of high school. For those of you that are Charlotte natives, I went to South Meg High School. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know. So graduated in 2001. But before that, to being woken up a little bit from being arrested and just realizing, hey, this isn't going in the right path. There's something about this that's not going to end well. I had some friends that had dropped out. My brother had dropped out of school. So things weren't looking too good. And so that moment I decided to see, well, what does it look like to coach? How do you get into high school coaching or college coaching? And so I talked to one of the strength coaches at South Mac. And he said, hey, why don't you just go talk to the head basketball coach here? I was like, that'd be a good idea since I want to coach basketball, not baseball. So I waited a little bit of time, and then I went and spoke to the head coach at the time. And he said, hey, if you're really interested I'll give you an opportunity to come back or next year. And he actually thought that I was going to be a senior the following year, but I was graduating. So he gave me the opportunity to come in and coach. I showed up. That was the summer of 2001. And I showed up every day, and I was working at Harris Teeter. I had started going to Central Piedmont Community College just to try to get some things worked out. And I think he was surprised because I would work full time. I was in school full time and I would coach full time. So I was working a lot, and the fact that I showed up, he kept giving me more and more responsibility. And to this day, I think he was one of the guys that really believed in me and started reshaping, not just the image of myself, but really giving me a chance to contribute somewhere and do something that was meaningful. And so that I was there for 4 years. I coached at South Mech for 4 years. And so that puts us into, you're going to get a lot of dates in this story. It's how I keep track of things. So coached for 4 years at South Mech. And then at the end of that 4 years, this is where things start to get interesting. In June 2004, I met a young lady. We started dating. And this kind of tells you where this is headed because it's not good. So in July of 2004, her brother-in-law called. Her phone, her and I were supposed to go to the beach the following week, or for the whole week. And he said, hey, do you think that Adam would be interested in coming to church with you? And so I hadn't had anyone that I knew of that went to church all the way back to when I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And so I was somewhat intrigued by the invitation, and I wasn't resistant to it. So I said yes. So we showed up. It was a church not too far from here in Birkdale Village. This was in 2004. Met him, met his family, met his wife. It was in a movie theater. So I thought that was really interesting coming from my experience in the Catholic Church, a very different world. So her and I went to the beach. We came back and we actually started going occasionally. So we went, maybe twice a month, maybe 3 times a month. And it was enough. It was intriguing enough for me to want to keep going. And the messages and the people seemed to be really nice people. So I kept going. And, mind you, I'm just hearing stories about Jesus. I'm seeing people pray. I would stand really still at worship. I would just stand like this the whole time, and I didn't know what to do. So then we get to the beginning of 2005. January 2005, I had finished at Central Piedmont. So I was dating this girl, finished at Central Piedmont, had been accepted into UNC Charlotte, which was a really big deal for my mom because she was certain that I wasn't getting out of high school. So for me to have made it through CP, made it to UNC Charlotte, was a big deal. So I had been working at Harris Teeter for a long time at this point. So my mom, there were some condos up in the university area, and she said, hey, you've been working for a long time. Like, you got a good work history, and why don't you think about getting your own place? It's terrifying on one level, but intriguing on another. So February 2005, I buy a condo and I move in March. We're going to jump a little bit. So new school, new place on my own. And I remember the first day that I ever walked in there, how empty it felt, because I have 3 siblings. I have a twin. So I couldn't ever remember a time in my life where I wasn't with someone. Every time I got on the school bus, my twin sister was there with me for, 12 years. So UNC Charlotte, buy a condo, move out on my own. May 4th, and May has been a really rich month for me for the last, 16 years. May 4th, this girl that I had been dating comes in, and out of nowhere, maybe it was just being a naive male, I don't know, but she came in and she said, hey, I want to break up. And so in that moment, that was maybe up to that point, the thing that I had connected to the most, or I come now to say that I was infatuated with her. I didn't love her, because then I find out later what love really is. But it was devastating to me. And I'm going to date some of you in the room right now, but how many of you are familiar with the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom? Okay, so the part when they're going to sacrifice this guy in the cave or the tomb, and I don't know what he is, the religious leader, rips into his heart and pulls out his chest and holds his heart in front of him. And then, that's what that moment felt like. So she leaves. I fall on the floor. I body crawl to my bedroom. I pull myself up on my bed. I'm laying there. I'm crying. I don't know what's going on. I'm in my apartment by my alone. And in that moment, it was May 4th, 2005. I heard God tell me that your life is not your own. So I sat up. I wasn't exactly sure what to do with that. I thought it was audible. I still to this day don't know if it was or not. So then I'm confused. My life's not my own. It looks like things aren't, in my mind, it looked like things were falling apart. So I didn't really know what to do with that for a few days. I didn't know who to talk to. I tried to call the girl that she had just broken up with me, and she was like, "Why are you calling me? None of this makes sense. Like, what's wrong with you?" So May 4th rolls around. I'm studying for my first semester exams. May 10th, so 6 days, I'm just trying to figure out what all this is and what I heard. May 10th, if you've been on the UNC Charlotte campus, I was a psychology student. You walk over some steps, and there's 3 pathways that become relevant years later, or 2 years later. But I'm standing there, and in front of me is Halton Arena, which is where the basketball team plays. The other path goes back to the middle of the campus, and then the other path goes to the parking garage. So I'm standing there, and I just decided in that moment, it was 9 o'clock in the morning, I had finished my exam. I decided that I was going to walk down to the basketball office and see if there was an opportunity for me to get involved. So I knock on the door. It's early. The head coach to the university at the time opens the door. I introduce myself, tell him what I want to do. He says, "Yeah, the assistants will be here later. If you want to come back another time, you're welcome to." I said, "I'll just go home." An hour later, I do not remember giving him my phone. I remember telling him my name. I didn't give him my phone number. It's not like I had business cards. I was 22 years old. I'm sitting on my couch by myself trying to make sense of everything that's going on. And his assistant, her name is Libby, she called my phone at 10 a.m. and said, "Libby, this is Adam," or I'm sorry, "Adam, this is Libby Aldridge from UNC Charlotte men's basketball program. Our graduate assistant's leaving soon. We'd like to know if you'd be interested in taking his spot." So that kind of blew my mind. I didn't know how to make sense of that occurring. So I hung up the phone. I started weeping. I was by myself in my apartment, and something inside me in that moment, it was May 10th, 2005, something broke open inside of me that I'd never experienced before. And when I opened my eyes, it literally felt that everything in my apartment had life on it. It was glowing. I don't know if it was like, and I knew immediately in that moment who it was. I knew that it was the Spirit of Jesus in that moment, but I still didn't know what to do with it. So a few days go by, and I'm thinking, all right, this may seem kind of crazy. I'm hearing God talk to me. I think I'm seeing the Spirit of God on everything. I'm not sure exactly how to manage this or what to do with it. So I thought it would be a good idea to go to the church that I had been going to with this young lady. A little bit awkward. She's already there with the next guy that she's dating. But her sister saw me and was just a good person. And she came up to me and she said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I tried to explain to her everything that was going on. And she's like, "Hey, I think you're in the right place." So we go in, she sits down beside me, her sister. The girl had been dating us a few rows in front of me. So it's like, I'm not there for her, but I'm like heartbroken. And it's this weird, emotional thing trying to manage. But it was the first day that church had ever done, I guess, what's called an altar call. It was the first day that I also had ever heard the story of Jonah. And how God had asked Jonah to go do something and told him his life wasn't his own, and he resisted and fought until he actually went and did it, but he was still mad and angry about it. So that day they gave an opportunity for anyone who wanted to accept Jesus to do that. And I knew in that moment, as soon as the pastor was saying that I couldn't say no. And so I stood up. Her sister stood up beside me just in support and kind of gave me a hug. And then I remember leaving. I didn't talk to anybody. So I'm going to have to fast forward a lot here. So to make it a little bit more awkward, the next day, or 2 days later, there was a Bible study that her brother-in-law, the guy who called and asked us to go to the, or if we would come meet him before we went to the beach, had been leading. So I thought it would be a good idea. I don't know what I was thinking, to show up to that, where it's a really intimate crowd. It's the girl that I was dating, her new boyfriend, and like 5 of her couple friends, and then her brother-in-law and his sister, or his wife. So I showed up, and we had a conversation about a scripture that night, and it was the first time that I had ever said anything. And so her brother-in-law was like, "Whoa, what's going on with this guy?" And so he pulled me aside. He said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I don't know. I think so, but I heard this happen. I heard God tell me my life wasn't my own. This happened in my apartment the other day. I stood up to acknowledge that I wanted to follow Jesus on Sunday, and now I'm here." He's like, "We should probably talk." So a few weeks go by. On June 2nd, he and I got together. We had lunch. I told him the whole story. He told me his whole testimony. On June 26th, 2006, I was baptized in Lake Norman. He became, the brother-in-law became a mentor for me. He gets credit, I would say, for discipling me over the last 16 years. I spent almost every hour that I wasn't in class or working with the basketball team at UNC Charlotte or working at Harris Teeter with him and his family. I got to see for the first time what a healthy marriage looked like. I got to see for the first time what being around and being a healthy parent looked like. And his 3 daughters now are 21, 19, and 17. And the 17-year-old is the first diaper that I ever changed. And they even watch our kids now, which is pretty fascinating. So he disciples me. He asked me in 2006, hey, I'm going to a leadership conference out in LA. Said, hey, you want to go with me? I'd never been to Los Angeles. I'm not an actor. I'm not a musician. I'm none of that. So we fly out to LA. It's actually at Mosaic LA. We go to the leadership conference out there. We come back coaching, trying to figure out life, integrating, following God. And then next year we go back out and we're sitting at LAX. And I said, I think God's calling me to LA. And he said, hey, whatever you got to do, just go. So that was in May of 2007. So May 2007, I know that I go in, hardest decision that I've ever made up to this point, I think, was to go into the basketball office at UNC Charlotte and talk with the head coach there and explain to him that I wasn't going to be the graduate assistant the following year. And he said, hey, what are you going to do? And I think I'm going to move to LA. And I had no job, no school. I had no idea where this was going. So I did that, dragged my feet because I didn't want to do what God was asking me to do. So instead of going immediately, I waited a few months, flew back to LA to see if I could meet someone or find a job or something. Came back, nothing. I was bored at that point, so I started working at a coffee shop to fill the time that I wasn't working with a team anymore. December 6th, 2007, I was on a date with another girl. That's a whole nother story. Got a phone call from one of the guys that I had met in LA. And he said, hey, I don't know if you're still interested in moving to LA, but I have a place for you to stay if you want to. So January 29th, 2008, I packed up my car and I drove across the country. I didn't know what I was going to do, or I did have a place to live, but I didn't know what I was going to do for work or school or any of that. So I got to fast forward a whole lot. So just disclaimer, I've never told this story in under 2 hours. So I'm trying to do it in 20 minutes. So there's a whole lot that's being just passed over at this point, but moved to LA. I was out there for 8 years. I was a part of the Mosaic LA community for a long time. That completely, I would say, is responsible for how I understand healthy community. I mean, obviously there's an evolution to it. They're not perfect at it, but that has shaped my idea of community and faith. And the really cool part of the story, or one of the cool parts of the story, I think, is, so fast forward, I met my wife in 2012. We got married in 2013. The brother-in-law was the one who discipled me, who had been my best friend for a long time. He's also the best man in my wedding. Now he has his 3 kids, and I guess 7 or 8 years ago now, they adopted a boy, and their son's middle name is Adam. And so when I look back over the last 16 years, I just think, one, the things that God was constantly trying to direct me to go towards that I was fighting. I also think about just the people that he placed in my life that helped reshape my whole image, not only of myself, but of other people, whether that be family, marriage, raising kids. Obviously, there's a lot more of the story, but my time is ending. So just to toss it back out there for each of you, is there something that God is asking of you or directing you to or leading you to that you're being resistant towards? And just something to think about. And thank you all.